Hey everybody, it is Chris Sepper. I run MedCityNews.com. Welcome back to episode 2, season 1 of MedHeads. I'm here with my selfie stick and with other members of the MedCityNews.com team as we talk about the week that was in healthcare. This week it's going to be a lot of HIMSS. As we know, the mega conference, Health IT mega conference, was in Chicago. I am here in beautiful Cleveland, Ohio. Go Cavs, wearing the T-shirt. I am joined by in Philadelphia, our early stage digital health editor, Stephanie Baum. Stephanie, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How about you, Chris?
Great. And in a bar in Chicago is a health IT reporter for MedCity, Neil Versel. Outstanding. Neil, what kind of beer is that?
This is an Omegang Glimmerglass from Omegang Brewery in Cooperstown, New York.
A regular for you?
Fine choice.
No, I decided to try it today. It's a saison. So it's I'm looking at the menu here. It's a 5.4% kind of a light kind of a lager, and it's very tasty. And since I was at HIMSS this week too, I felt like I earned it. And it's a Friday. And I think you ought to have one as well, Chris.
Oh, I'm a Scotch man. But
Okay.
Cezanne, who knew that he made beers as well as painted, which I think is pretty amazing. Anyway, so yeah, Neil, you and I were on the ground at HIMSS in Chicago, McCormick Place, scalding number like 39,000 or something insane like that.
43, I believe, was the final number. 43,000.
43, insane. Stephanie, you were watching from afar. Bird dogging things. So, this is going to be a lot of conversation about HIMSS today and what it meant, what's happening, what's coming next. Neil, from all the things that you saw, heard, read, what was the biggest takeaway that you had?
You know, it's really hard to say that there was a big takeaway. I mean, every year there seems to be a theme, but our plans kind of got a little thrown off last week with a couple of things coming out of Washington. Number one was the scathing ONC report about information blocking, as they called it, from ONC. It was calling out vendors without naming names for hampering interoperability. And then last Friday, late Friday afternoon, right around this time, in fact, a week ago, CMS dropped some proposed modifications to Stage 2 of meaningful use, which, as expected, would shorten the reporting period in 2015 to 90 days. But they also surprised a lot of people by rolling back the patient engagement portion of Stage 2 from 5% to one single patient. And that set a lot of people off in the patient engagement community, and even a few vendors as well, who think that a lot of their hard work is going to naught. And in fact, as I reported, we were the first to have the story up on Sunday. Former National IT Coordinator Farzad Mastashari blasted the modifications. In fact, if you recall, when he was still at ONC, he pretty much wrote the Stage 2 rules, and now they're kind of messing with his baby a little bit. He's a big supporter of patient engagement, and he, with a lot of patient advocates in the room, called for a day of action where they hope that 1 million people will get to call their doctors, call their hospitals, and demand access to their records.
So it sounds like. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah.
Well, so it sounds like, one of the big themes for you then was, this idea of kind of almost a moment of truth on how patients are going to be engaged when it comes to health IT. I remember there was they put out so many studies at HIMSS. There was a health IT study that said 72% of health IT professionals think consumer and patient engagement is the #1 business issue.
Yeah.
That's pretty sharp contrast to what you're talking about, where you have outrage over ONC rules that say, we're going to peel back patient input. Karen DeSalvo was there, and
Yes.
she closed it out. What did she say about that at the end?
Well, she said that she was as diplomatic as she could be, and she sounded like a bureaucrat, and she can't really comment on specifics in rules or controversies while rulemakings are in progress. So she's kind of hamstrung legally by that. I was at the press conference that she held on Tuesday, and specifically asked her about that, and basically she said patient engagement is important to us. A lot of bureaucratic speak, and didn't really say anything of substance. Didn't really say anything other than she supports the idea during her keynote yesterday either. So I'm not really sure where this is headed. I know that, and I've been in touch with a few of the patient engagement luminaries. Regina Holiday, who is making the most noise about this, wanted to have a big thing on the 4th of July to call it the Independence Day for health data, and then it got pointed out to her that a lot of doctors' offices and hospital records departments are going to be closed that day. So symbolic, yeah, symbolic. So they were talking maybe Health Data Palooza next month, maybe she wants to have a paint-in at, she's a painter, an artist, at at HHS headquarters at some point this summer. Some people want to do it before the 60-day comment period on the proposed rules ends, and the period ended or opened this past week on Wednesday. So have until I think it's about June 13th or 14th to get the comments in. Some people want to do it then. Some people don't care and still like the July 4th symbolism, or maybe July 3rd or 5th. So who knows when this is actually happening, and who knows if it's really going to spread beyond the very relatively small community of highly engaged patients like her, like Dave DeBroncart, etc. Yeah.
Stephanie, I mean, obviously you're doing a lot of the digital health early stage folks. How much does patient engagement resonate, or how much are people in the early stage world still adjusting to the concept that patients are their customers more than a health insurance company or a hospital is their customer?
Sorry, you broke up a little bit. Could you repeat that?
Sure. How often are the early stage digital health companies reacting to the fact that customers are really patients instead of hospitals or health insurance companies? How big in the end are early stage companies when it comes to digital engagement?
I mean, I've talked to several companies lately that are focused on giving patients a copy of their personal health records, but it's also you're seeing less of companies that are aligning themselves to, say, the Blue Button initiative, like HUMSS did, and more companies that are working with hospitals to integrate an app with their portal, so that patients can get a copy of their own health records. I mean, patient engagement is huge among the digital health companies that I cover, but the sort of the meaningful use stage 2 and those kind of government initiatives are kind of they're an incentive, but it doesn't really affect sort of how these companies are doing business, I don't think.
Yeah, I actually was talking with Chris Boone today. We're still not done with our HIMSS coverage. I'm going to write something about the health data revolution and how I think many of the revolutionaries have gone and moved to the suburbs, right? But I think that one thing that I'll just say this right now to Regina or anybody else: we've got our MedCity Engage conference in DC in 14th and 15th, and I'll dedicate a fireside chat or a breakout session to break down exactly what happened and what's gone right or wrong when it comes to meaningful use stage 2 and what it means for patient engagement. Because that'll be 1 month after the public comment period, and we should know a lot more.
Yeah.
I mean, there were huge, HIMSS last year and HIMSS this year were night and day, right? There were huge announcements. I thought the IBM announcement was a monster. Because
I agree.
Yeah,
I agree.
Because I think, and Stephanie, you too. I mean, this is Watson, which has essentially been roaming the healthcare landscape, kind of looking for a clue and just eating data, coming back and saying, all right, we know exactly what we're going to do. We're going to take structured and unstructured data, right? They're usually just good at unstructured data. And then we're going to start to do really aggressive things with some of the biggest players in the space, legitimacy to Apple, Johnson & Johnson and Medtronic. I mean, I think if there is one thing besides the policy, I think the IBM thing was it. I don't know if either of you have a thought on that. Cleveland police coming by to take me away.
Oh, I absolutely agree with you. But go ahead, Stephanie. You wanted to jump in first.
Yeah, I was just going to say it definitely seems in keeping with this trend that we're seeing, that I've seen, and I'm sure Neil's seen, as far as the level of interest in using artificial intelligence and machine learning to to support companies developing predictive analytics tools. IBM Watson, the Watson computer, the superbrain that they've applied to healthcare. I mean, so many companies are interested in using the resources that can provide and tap into. I agree. It was definitely the dominant deal, especially of the fact that they acquired Explorus, which has been a big player in the healthcare analytics space for several years now.
Neil?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. I think, everybody's talking about analytics. Everybody's talking about interoperability. I mean, even George W. Bush, who keynoted he keynoted on Wednesday late afternoon, joked about interoperability a little bit, as he was sort of looking back on his pronouncement and of calling for interoperable health records 11 years ago now, and even talked about that. But now it's all becoming reality. However, people are still struggling with how to do it, and IBM's play is Watson, this supercomputer, but they need partners to to feed the data to this supercomputer, and I think that's what's finally happening here. They're finally developing a real strategy, whereas when they unveiled it 2 or 3 years ago, and had a press tour for healthcare, they had a press day here in Chicago at their local office to just talk about how Watson will work in healthcare, but it was all at that point mostly theoretical. Now it looks like they have some substance behind it.
Yeah, I think that you said it right. There were a lot of jealous startups at HIMSS coming up to me and trying to figure out, like, why did they buy Explorus? Like, what is so great about Explorus, or what is so great about Fitel? And in the bottom line is, I think what you said, like Watson is the hungry-mungry of healthcare, right? It is going to eat your feet. It's going to eat Spain. It's going to eat the police. Like, it's going to eat. It needs the feed all the time. And I think what you saw in the 2 startups that they bought was, one, all Explorus is structured health data. I mean, I think it's hundreds of millions of patient records, right? That now Watson can consume. And then with Fitel, like, it lives in the cloud, and when you give it data, it knows what to do about it. And so I think that if you're a startup too, and I had a couple talk to me there, I think Watson is so used to eating unstructured data, now it needs to consume structured data, right? So who's going to be bought? Who would you, if you were Watson, right? Who would you buy next? Like, I would look for people who can translate structured data into different formats, right? And I'd look for people who could feed me a reservoir of data constantly, and I'd look for people who live nice in the cloud.
Sure.
So, like, who fits? Let me ask this. Let me ask this question. Who fits that description? Who fits this description, right? Who fits that description of the startups or the companies Like, who should Hungry Mungry eat next if it's already eaten Explorus and it's already eaten Fitel?
That's tough. That's it. Yeah, you go, Neil.
Okay. Well, I was going to say I think I honestly don't know who they might get next. I think Stephanie is a little bit closer to that issue, but I was going to say the unstructured data is still, I think, extremely important. I don't want to minimize that at all, because there is so much unstructured data just sitting in EHR and claims databases from so many years back that can that needs to be brought out. And another buzzword we've heard from the last couple of years has been natural language processing. That's finally starting to happen. When I think natural language processing, I wonder, if somebody like Nuance might not be in IBM's target. But I don't know if Nuance is for sale. I think they're doing very well with what they're doing. Now, as far as the structured data, Chris, you made a great point that there is a lot of structured data, but a lot of it, one of the hang-ups, one of the roadblocks to interoperability is the fact that it's structured across platforms in so many different formats that it's difficult to send it from one to another and then being able to use it on the back end. So there has to be some either standardization or translation. I think that the standardization is going to have to happen on a national level, either by government policy or by industry agreement.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's. But there's still a huge market for the translation of both unstructured and structured data, and there will continue to be for a number of years, I think.
Steffel, what do you think about the startups?
I mean, it's interesting. I mean, they in the announcement that they made at the time, they highlighted some of the startups that they had already invested in, and the top of the list was Welltalk. And they've when Watson started their their fund to invest in companies, Welltalk was top of the list, and they've used Watson's cognitive computing tools to as part of their Cafe Well product, and that's designed to address consumer questions on their health conditions, but also direct them to healthy activities. I mean, they're obviously it depends on how much data the user is willing to share, but they could find out the user is in New York City for a weekend, and they can kind of rattle off different suggestions of activities they should do to meet specific health goals. Those are really it sounds like a lot of complex cognitive machinery for such a kind of a straightforward application. But I mean, when you think about that, each person is different, and each person has a different set of priorities, a different set of needs. I mean, that's when it gets really interesting.
All right, let me try a few names out on you, Stephanie. I want to hear your yes or no on these, all right? So I'm thinking structured, unstructured data. I'm thinking people who can translate it well. Just tell me crazy or not crazy, meaning me. Validic.
Wait, you broke up a little bit. Could you just say that one more time about the structured and unstructured data?
Well, I'm just thinking about structured and unstructured data when it comes to Watson. So who would Watson eat and buy? What about a Validic?
I mean, Validic is an interesting company because they're a young company, but they've grown hugely in the last few years, and it seems like not only are large companies using them to de-silo data from medical devices and fitness apps, but also other startups are using them for similar applications as well. So they're a really interesting. They would be a really interesting target. Yeah.
Lumiata.
Lumiata, I'm not as sure about.
All right. What about Athena Health? Now, hear me out on this, and I'm probably, in fact,
yeah.
I'm gonna write about this too. All right. So look, what is Watson? What has Watson become? Watson has become, right, a cloud-based provider of personalized information. Right. Watson needs to eat. How do you eat better than having your own EMR working? Now, EMR isn't exactly the biggest margin business, but you've got to remember, for IBM, it could be a loss leader to feed that $17 billion revenue in analytics, right? So why wouldn't you take a cloud-based service that plays well with others? I mean, all deference, and I know we've got some, again, our HIMSS coverage, we've got a story on health data, we've got a Jonathan Bush interview coming out of this that Neil's going to write, we've got a few more things that'll publish. But I mean, in my mind, and Neil, I'm going to mute you with the Bar Patriots getting cray. Why wouldn't you get someone like that to plug in who knows cloud really well, who could really deliver personalized information and again serve as that basic constant stream of food that Watson is going to need to eat? It sounds gigantic, but we got to remember that IBM is the giant. So it could consume Athena Health, not at its like bloated stock price now, but when that stock price comes back down to earth, because Epic's never going away, and that battle's not going to be won. And so we can push the PR aside, and then Athena can get to its end game, which would be in a great place. That's my cray version of the acquisition opportunities. Stephanie, what do you think about that?
I think That is just such a big fish to swallow, and Athena Health has. I mean, I could imagine they would, if they are interested, they would buy a portion of it. I can't see them acquiring the whole thing though.
Good point.
I
Because
want to. Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Neil.
Okay. Yeah, I'm thinking. Yeah, maybe if not Athena Health, I think that Jonathan Bush is having too much fun to want to get out of this business. He seems to really enjoy what he's doing, and you'll see it in the interview that we have, and we'll have video from a third party of that interview, uh, hopefully sometime next week. But I'm wondering if some of the maybe Athena Health sort of the startup or the emerging companies that cloud companies such as maybe Care Cloud that have become competitors to Athena Health might be more in IBM sites. That company actually hired a lot of opened a Boston office and hired a lot of former Athena employees.
And of course, I mean, and part of this, and we'll move on from it. If you look at IBM's press release, it listed a bunch of early stage companies it's already working with, and those could easily be consumed. One of them, I got a total side crazy story. So one of those is Modernizing Medicine, right? It's this EMR company already. True story. We had Modernizing Medicine in our first Converge startup showcase. A physician who didn't like them offered me $5,000 to kick them out of the startup showcase. Was going to cut me a $5K check. I turned them down, and Modernizing Medicine. He did not have a good customer experience with them. That's the long and the short of that.
Wow, that's a good learning. It's a good learning point for startups or other companies who might be listening. Don't piss off your customers.
Don't piss off a doctor.
Yeah.
Well, look, we're not going to do something bad like that. Stephanie, from outside looking in, I mean, what? And let's say this. Let's pick a favorite as we'll close it off here. Let's pick a favorite moment from HIMSS for each of you. Or most interesting company, interesting innovation, interesting factoid beyond the IBM thing. Neil, you can go first.
Okay. Well, I think the story that we got exclusively of GE Healthcare wanting to get out of the hospital EMR business kind of came out of nowhere. It was a lot of serendipity involved in that story, I have to say. I got a tip from, I'm not going to say who because we're journalists and we don't have to, and messaged Chris, who just happened to have just gotten out of a meeting with a GE Healthcare executive. He turned around, went right back to the booth, and brought that up, and they confirmed what we had heard, and Chris then messaged me to get over there, so I hightailed it across the exhibit hall to the GE booth, and we got a scoop there. It's in retrospect,
synchronicity.
Yeah, exactly. So in retrospect, it's not surprising that GE wants to get out of the inpatient EMR business because, to be honest, Epic and Cerner are eating everybody's lunch in the enterprise world. Some of the other we should have seen some market consolidation already, or one of the big players possibly going away, and I guess this is the first one there. Now, what's interesting is that they then told us after we ran the story that they had made the decision 3 years earlier. And,
which is
wow.
true, right? And they knew that. But I think what was great about that story is, I mean, a lot of people hadn't known about that, and it really speaks to that transition in healthcare and in the space.
Yeah.
And I wonder, I mean, boy, people piled on. If you look in the comments, even just the comment section, they took a shot at GE for, was it the MedStar outage and things like that? So, Neil, I mean, what is this a big deal that they go away, or was it already exit stage left for their inpatient business anyhow?
I think it probably was. I think back to something I heard probably about 3 years ago. It was a report from the advisory board on whose was replacing systems, what they were replacing it with, and what they were replacing. Did you follow that there? Apparently GE was the most replaced hospital system then that year. I think it was about 3 years ago, according to the advisory's
Wow.
research. So, and
So
they were losing almost all of their customers to Epic. Although in the case of Intermountain, the most high-profile one, they lost to Cerner.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, let me go next. It's so funny. I had there were a lot of great early stage innovations at HIMSS this year, and it's oddly I'm just gonna I guess since we just beat up on IBM, we just talked about on GE Healthcare. I actually love the Denials IQ product from GE Healthcare. I mean, it's part of their conversion and change from centricity,
Yeah.
and I loved it
Yeah.
because
They did say that they're doubling down on pretty much everything else, and double down is the phrase that they used on their outpatient EMR, on their analytic services, and of course their historical strength being imaging and medical devices are they're not those aren't going anywhere.
yeah, no, and so well, and this is we
Yeah.
just talked about how IBM is so sexy
Yeah.
with its data.
Right.
Denials IQ is like the big unsexy, right? It's just taking claims denials data and doing a little minority report on it where they can tell in advance
Yeah.
when something's going to be denied, and that's. I mean, what healthcare probably doesn't have enough of is tangible money savers,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that to me is a real tangible money
Yeah.
saver.
Well, you know
Stephanie,
what?
what about? Well, go ahead, Neil.
Yeah, you know what? This is almost a realization of a promise I've been hearing for a good 10 years about real-time claims adjudication. If you remember that buzzword from probably 10 years ago, maybe 5 to 10, and you keep hearing, well, it's a year or two away, it's a year or two away, and what you just described sounds like it's finally here, where patients, now that they have a greater, and they keep having a greater share of the bill being their responsibility out of pocket, and medical practices are demanding payment at the time of service for the patient responsibility, to know exactly what they're going to owe because the claim has been adjudicated in real time is really a big win for the patient and also a big win for the medical practice, particularly primary care, because if a $50 copay walks out the door, they're never going to see that money again because it's just not worth it to send that to collections.
Stephanie, what about you? Anything from looking from afar? What really caught your imagination on all the things rolling out of HIMSS?
I mean, I thought one of the trends from my perspective at HIMSS, from what I was following, was cybercrime. I mean, there were a few different announcements that came out this week, but there was one company that was at HIMSS, and they're on the young side, and it's called Crosschecks. They just raised 15 million. They just closed a Series B round, raising 15 million, and their thing is using biometrics, a fingerprint, to verify a patient's identification. And the reason for that is twofold. On the one side, definitely the security issue. I mean, there was a report in the Journal of the American Medical Association this week that showed a definite increase in the number of data breaches at hospitals between, I think it was 2010 and 2013. But on the other side, you also have the patient safety issue. And this has been brought up a lot by groups like the Cree Institute. But you could have two people with the same name, Robert Jones or something, both with medical records at a particular hospital, and their records could get totally fouled up, and you might have one of them getting the wrong medication, or worse, maybe the wrong surgery or something. I mean, I'm not citing a specific case. I'm just saying that there's a lot of potential for errors there, and so they've developed this tool to verify people's identification. It just seems like a really good time for this kind of technology.
So, we just beat the hell out of HIMSS, right? But there was another world out there besides it. So, I felt, not for a while, I felt like I was going to the HIMSS rubber room. But what do you think was the most important, non-HIMSS healthcare innovation event that happened, or news item that happened this week?
I mean, it was patients like me didn't sign an agreement with AstraZeneca to join their group of drug developers. But what was interesting about that deal was that, unlike their other agreements with drug companies like Merck, it wasn't just for their U.S. Business. It was with their global R&D. So this is Patients Like Me works with pharmaceutical companies to give them access to their patient populations so that they can. The idea is that patients share with them what their experience of their disease is, what their priorities would be for a medication. That might very well be different from what the pharmaceutical company's goal is, and it's not. It's I mean, who knows what will come out of it at the end of the day? But it's encouraging to see a big pharma company making such a huge commitment to the patient's interest, the patient experience.
I thought one of the big things this week was you had two big funds go all in with Atlas Ventures and NEA raising big funds, and I thought Atlas was really interesting. Megan Akeshevan for us wrote about this. Atlas paired its IT investment and went straight to biotech, and which is really in some ways refreshing, because 4 or 5 years ago you had a lot of kind of finger in the wind VCs jumping on the health IT train. It's not saying there isn't a lot of things to invest in there, but the life sciences are still where a lot of bread is buttered, and so I thought that was one of the more amazing things. Neil, what about you? What did you see out there? I don't know if you're still out of HIMSS technically, so I don't know if you saw anything else that caught your eye.
I'm 8 miles away right now and very happy to be there. Very happy to be there. I didn't get a whole lot of time on the exhibit floor because I was just kind of focused on, some of the big picture health IT stuff more so than the startups.
Yeah. Well, and I'll say this to close us out here. We're at a half-hour mark, and we will be taking a selfie. Please God, the last HIMSS selfie ever to be taken as part of this.
Yeah. And the second to last is the one you posted half an hour ago.
That's right. I'm addicted now. But listen, Nicole Oran, who covers pop culture and kind of health culture for MedCity, just posted this, and I swear I am hooked. In fact, I'm spending all weekend catching up on Orphan Black, which is this great clone biotech show that's shown on BBC, but it's going to be cloned. They make this funny on 5 different channels. If you're into biotech or life sciences, I think you will quickly fall in love with Orphan Black, and it is on this weekend, or at least the premiere is next week, and so I've got to catch up. I've got almost all of season 2 on my TiVo, and I've seen season 1. It's amazing. I mean, if you're a patent geek or you're a life science geek, you will love how the company decides to patent these clones, like the approach they take, and this question of are there current issues of nature versus nurture? If we're in the midst of personalized medicine, so you're going to love it. And that's going to be the last word of lack of wisdom from me and from us on this episode of MedHeads. Speaking for Stephanie Baum and speaking for Neil Versel, I hope you enjoyed this and we were illuminating, and here is that.
Cheers.
Later. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great weekend. Love that beer, Neil. Take care. Bye-bye.